Well, joining us now live from Rideau Hall, where the election writ was just dropped, is our friend David Menzies. David, nice to see you. Is that where you are? Are you outside of Rideau Hall right now?
I am indeed, Ezra, and I'm considerably closer to Rideau Hall than I was a half hour ago when Prime Minister Trudeau was making his announcement, because as you may or may not know, of the more than 100 media types here, I was the only one pinpointed by security and the parliamentary press gallery person and the Rideau Hall public affairs person, and told that I had to go to the public viewing area, which had no video, no audio, and I had to stand with members of the public. Not that I mind doing that, but it just completely impeded my role in doing my job in covering this announcement, which, of course, I think was the ostensible policy reason, i.e. to enact a little bit of petty revenge on the rebel media for our critical coverage of this regime in the last 4 years.
Yeah, you know, I note that Xinhua, which is, as you can tell by the name, a Chinese state broadcaster, they are fully accredited by the Parliamentary Press Gallery and Justin Trudeau. So literally a Communist Party propaganda outlet that is in no way a journalistic outfit at all. In fact, they've been credibly accused of being Chinese spies. They're good enough for the Parliamentary Press Gallery and Justin Trudeau, but not the rebel. And you're so accurate for pointing out why. It's because we criticize Trudeau in a way that the other media don't. And I think that shows how small Trudeau is and how thin-skinned he is, but it also shows how compliant Canada's media are. And I think it proves my thesis that we need to tell the other side of the story, because you're certainly not going to find it amongst the bailout media, the Justin Journos, as I sometimes call them, who are on his payroll. I mean, I suppose you can't blame a guy for not wanting to attack his boss. And about 95% of the journalists in Canada are now directly or indirectly on Justin Trudeau's payroll. I guess it's tough to criticize the guy who puts bread on your family's table. But they shouldn't call themselves reporters then. They should call themselves government reporters, or, you know, sponsored reporters or liberal reporters. But if you're taking money from Trudeau and helping to blackball the one company that isn't, I don't think you can call yourself a reporter without a qualifying adjective in front of that.
Yeah, and I agree with that entirely, Ezra. And to give credit where credit is due, there are some journalists with some of these media organizations that are dead set against taking this money as part of a bailout based on those ethical concerns that you just adroitly mentioned. But clearly, this is where the media is with the Trudeau Liberals in 2019. I call it, Ezra, it's the carrot or the stick. It's be compliant, be good, don't be too critical, and the check is in the mail. Or be like rebel media, and you are sent to the little kids' table. Yeah. You are cut off from access. And so what's it going to be? The hard way or the easy way? And listen, media jobs are few and far between these days. It's basically a sunset industry, if you will. So I don't think there is a there is a compulsion amongst many journalists to rock the boat too much, because if it means, economic penalization by way of you losing your job, there's not a lot of opportunities out there. The second thing I want to say, Ezra, when you mentioned the pettiness, is that how self-defeating this is. I think Trudeau is a bit of an egomaniac. And I have no doubt this is being directed by him, much as how our own Sheila Gunn-Reid was banned from going to a UN conference in Poland. Myself and my cameraman were banned from going to one in Morocco. Our own Canadian government told the UN not to let us in. And here's the thing, much like those stories, if they had just let me join the scrum of more than 100 journalists here earlier today, I should say. I'm just a face in the crowd. I'm harmless. I wasn't going to do any kind of stunt. I wasn't going to do anything embarrassing. But instead, I get frog marched out to the public area and sequestered and kept a very keen eye on by security. And that becomes the story. And the story isn't good, Ezra. The optics are brutal for a government that came to power in 2015. Remember? Transparency. He was always saying transparency and sunny ways. Well, my friend, these are slimy ways.
Yeah. Well, listen, if they're willing to tell the RCMP to buzz off over their criminal investigation for obstruction, obviously they don't have any compunction about telling a journalist to buzz off. You say it looks awful. I think it does look awful to severely normal Canadians, but it has a salutary effect because it's a warning to other journalists. Don't you dare criticize Trudeau, or you too will be escorted out by security. So yeah, it's deeply embarrassing to Trudeau, to Canadians who say, hang on, I thought we had freedom of the press. But for anyone who works at the CBC or the rest of the bailout media, it's, oh, right, those are the rebel media guys. Those guys didn't take the bailout. Those guys criticized Trudeau. I don't want that to happen to me. I'll just write another story about his awesome socks and how cool he is.
And you know, Ezra, the funny thing is, there was a Bell Media fellow who was briefly filming my interaction with the parliamentary press gallery fellow, Pierre. And I reached out to him, and I reached out later to a CTV camera crew. And basically, I was hoping for some of the love you got in the UK a couple of months ago when, remember, you were going to be excluded from a Chrystia Freeland powwow. And shockingly and surprisingly, members of the media basically stood up and said, no, it's all of us or none of us. I don't know if that was a statistical anomaly, Ezra, or if really the new normal or the new abnormal is don't get involved. We don't want to get on Trudeau's media blacklist.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny because when I was in Ottawa myself a few weeks ago for the meeting between Chrystia Freeland and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, I was smuggled into that press conference by Secretary Pompeo, which is quite something. I met with the president of the press gallery who was there, and he was quite upset to see me there, and we had a good, pleasant talk, and he said, send me an email, let's continue the conversation. I did send him the email. I don't think I've heard back. I'll check again to make sure I didn't miss the email. I blame them. There is no longer a dividing line. I mean, obviously Trudeau is the one who has most of the blame, but the media went along with it, and they're continuing to go along with it. And you mentioned an incident in London, an anomaly where they stood with us. I think that's probably because those reporters were overseas reporters who aren't part of the rebel derangement syndrome here in Canada. I think that it's a great discredit to Canada's parliamentary press gallery where there is no dividing line between them and the government anymore. And Xinhua, the Chinese propaganda firm, is welcome, but independent journalists are not. I suppose I shouldn't be too mad, though, David, because that is exactly why the rebel has succeeded over the last 4.5 years, because no one can trust the media party. You just can't trust someone who is being paid by the person they're supposed to be holding to account. If Justin Trudeau is paying you, you can never ask him a tough question. So people can see that and detect that. That's why the Rebel is growing, and the CBC, the National, their viewership is at its lowest in decades. On any given day, we have more viewers of the Rebel than the CBC, the National has. That's a fact.
And I think that's part of the resentment and maybe part of the competitiveness, Ezra, because let's face it, when you're talking those kind of numbers, we are a bona fide competitor to these media organizations. And so why would you help your competitor, I guess? But I want to go back to what you mentioned, the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Just by its name alone, Ezra, Parliamentary and Press Gallery, you think this is an organization that would be committed to the ideals of democracy and the ideals of freedom of the press and freedom of speech and freedom of expression by going to bat for a journalist. But they're the ones complicit in banning us. I only found out that you had to have accreditations from the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Literally a few hours. I was literally in transit from Toronto coming to Ottawa to cover this. But it's a moot point, because if you remember, Ezra, when I went to Ottawa to cover the Justice Committee hearings on the Canadian Human Rights Act, this whole idea of resurrecting the anti-free speech, pro-censorship section 13, that Stephen Harper got rid of in 2013, well, I was denied those parliamentary press credentials that we had applied for the day before, literally 10 minutes before the committee hearing was to begin. Yeah. So again, it's this pettiness, it's this level of spite, and quite frankly, it's unprofessional.
Yeah. Now, and the obvious point is, as you mentioned earlier, look, there's 100 journalists there. It's not like there was any meaningful question and answer session. The most you would do is have your own camera pointing at Trudeau. We'll get that footage anyways. We subscribe to a media pool, so it in no way, it just nothing turns on it other than they want to show what happens if you disagree. And the journalists who were actually the errand boys here, the journalists running the Parliamentary Press Gallery, they may be saving their own jobs, but they're burying the industry. And you know what? I, for one, don't mourn the loss of the media party, because although I have no animus towards any individual reporter, and I believe everyone should be able to work hard and earn a living, if you have become a censor just to keep your job as a government journalist, you know what? I don't mind if your choices have made your company so untenable that no one wants to read your pro-Trudeau crap that you lose your job. I'm sorry, I have only a limited number of tears to cry, and I won't cry them for a reporter censor who buried his own industry because he thought sucking up to Trudeau was the way to buy himself another 6 or 12 months before a layoff. Last word to you, David.
Yes, no, 100%, Ezra. As I've long said, there's only one thing worse than censorship, and that is self-censorship. And we are seeing that every day in the media coverage that we get. And secondly, to your point about the kind of questions Trudeau was going to receive after dropping the writ, well, one of them, how's this for a hardball question? Why are you jetting off to BC to do your campaigning? And Trudeau's answer is, well, I consider BC to be my second home. To which I would add, maybe we better send out an Amber Alert to Rose Knight, just in case.
Yeah, I mean, why are you going to BC? Could you imagine? So the front page of the Globe and Mail today is about his crooked obstruction of the RCMP. And some journalist, I'm curious who was, hi, Prime Minister, you're so dreamy. I've got a question. Okay, I can't ask about feminist stuff. I can't ask about SNC Lavalin. I can't ask about the economy. I can't ask about budget or the carbon tax. Can't ask about the fact that the Conservatives won the election yesterday in Manitoba. Hey, why are you going to BC? Yeah, boy. I can see why Trudeau loves him his Parliamentary Press Gallery. I've seen high school newspapers with tougher questions than that. I want to know who that loser was, and I want to know how much their bailout is. I don't know who that was, but I'm deeply embarrassed for them. I'm glad I don't know who they are, because I would... go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Ezra, I wish I knew who it was too, but remember, I was consigned to the public area, literally roped off. Yeah. And,
hi, Prime Minister, or can I call you Justin? Can I get a selfie? And of course, that's not even a joke. That's Rosemary Barton. All right, David. Well, in the campaign trail ahead, the Parliamentary Press Gallery no longer has its authority, because they actually are an arm of the government. And I'm not speaking in a metaphor. They are an arm of the government, which is how they get their authority. But on the campaign trail, that no longer exists. So today was the last day they'll be able to stop us from covering politics till October 21st. And we'll make up for lost time. I promise you that.
Yeah, that's great. We have we're going to hit the ground running for sure, Ezra. And regardless of the interference, we're not going to put up with it, and nor can we be bought.
Yeah. All right. Well, keep up the fight, David. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ezra.
All right. There you have it, David Menzies on the scene at Rideau Hall. Can you imagine how petty the Liberals are? Of course, you can imagine how petty they are. They're crooks. That's not my opinion. They've broken the law time and again. That's the ethics counselor's verdict and conviction. That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest. And then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.